Extraordinary claims coming out of Canberra tonight, with a former Prime Minister allegedly on a list of suspected pedophiles. Liberal Senator Bill Heffernan, who is pushing for the Child Abuse Royal Commission to include the legal profession, told an explosive Senate hearing he has a police list of 28 prominent suspects.
There's a former Prime Minister on this list, and it is a police document.
And now I'd like to introduce to you Fiona Barnett, that's B-A-R-N-E-T-T, who is one of the bravest people you will ever have the privilege to meet.
Throughout my childhood, I was a victim of Australia's VIP child sex trafficking ring. For example, I was prostituted to pedophile parties at Parliament House Canberra and to an international leader at Fairbairn Military Airport. The people involved in this elite pedophile ring included high-ranking politicians, police and judiciary. From the late 1980s, I reported my abuse experiences to multiple healthcare professionals, not one of whom adhered to mandatory reporting requirements. I reported to New South Wales Police in 2008. I reported to the Royal Commission in 2012. I reported to Operation Attest in Canberra. I made formal witness statements to New South Wales Police and have agreed to do more. I've reported directly to the New South Wales and Federal Police Commissioners and to the New South Wales Coroner. I have provided sufficient names, times, dates and places for authorities to investigate. My experiences were horrific beyond words. I witnessed child abduction, torture, rape, murder. But the way I've been treated for reporting the crimes I witnessed and experienced has been far worse than my original abuse experiences. Victims endure the most miserable childhoods. We then spend the rest of our lives paying for the crimes committed against us. Victims are constantly placed under excessive scrutiny. If we can't provide a precise time and date for something that happened 40 years ago, we're called liars. If we get emotional, we're labelled crazy. If we are vocal, we're just attention seekers. It's time to focus our attention away from victims and onto those responsible for the crimes against children. In the 2006 census, Australians identified child protection as their #1 concern. Why then does our government continue to ignore the public's concern for children? Australia is a pedophile haven. Our laws are written, interpreted and administered in a way that benefits pedophiles and silences victims of crime. Our university lecturers teach pro-pedophilia material. Our health boards continue to allow offending doctors and psychologists to practice. We are up to our second Royal Commission into child abuse in 20 years. The Wood Royal Commission was indeed a failure. If it was successful, I wouldn't be standing here right now. The Wood Royal Commission was established in response to complaints about the VIP pedophile ring that abused me. This is the exact same elite pedophile ring that I reported to the current Royal Commission. In 2013, I asked the Royal Commission, what are you going to do differently to the failed Wood Royal Commission? They had no answer for me. If the Royal Commission does not result in the investigation and prosecution of the VIP pedophiles that victims like me have named, then they are just information gathering. I know you want me to stand here and name names. Yet to concentrate on the names serves to shift the focus from the entire reason I'm standing here. I have provided the names to the authorities. It is their responsibility to combine my information with what other victims have presented and properly investigate. And now I will give you some VIP names. Michelle. Michelle was a friendly 12-year-old with long dark hair. I witnessed her abduction, rape and murder when I was 6 years old. Samantha. Samantha was 9 years old with wavy long brown hair and a warm smile. She had Down syndrome. Samantha was murdered when I was 12 years old. Chloe. Chloe was an attractive 4-year-old with brown straight cut hair into a bulb and sea green eyes. Chloe was murdered when I was 14 years old. Don't make this about me. Focus on those victims who couldn't be here today to personally share what happened to them at the hands of the VIP pedophiles who have infiltrated Australia's supreme institutions.
She always used to have beautiful gardens, flower gardens, full of flower gardens.
Down there is Holsworthy Army Barracks. It's not very, it's just a 5-minute drive away or so on Heathcote Road. So everything's very, very close. We're very close to Waterfall. Waterfall's just 2 train stations away. It goes Engadine, Heathcote, Waterfall, and all that down there, those mountains out there, acres and acres and acres of bushland where they've committed multiple murders. I've seen people murdered in the bush. I've seen a guy tied to 4 different vehicles, and bikies were involved as well, and they all drove off in different directions and his body exploded. I was age 6 when I saw that. I've seen multiple human sacrifices of children, hobos, people they abducted, children bred in captivity. And this is where it all started. These are the people that handed me over. Helen was Lithuanian and Peter was Polish.
Fiona had been staying with Helen and Peter, and she was 3 years of age, and I must have picked her up on the Sunday night, and she came home, and she went into her bedroom and that, and I could just see her standing at the door, and she said, right, she said, you're not allowed in my room anymore.
She was fun.
Fun.
Yeah. She was rebellious. She stood up to teachers. She was always entertaining. It was always good to just be standing a couple of metres away from her when that was happening. You would never go and stand next to her because you wouldn't want to get in trouble yourself.
I was an unwilling member of a coven, which was part of a greater crime syndicate, which involved drugs, guns, and sex trafficking, including child sex trafficking, human trafficking.
So you were an unwitting part of that coven?
Yes, absolutely.
And
I
then
signed up from before my birth.
Well,
Absolutely.
You didn't sign up if it was before.
I did not sign up, so it was like being born into the mafia, but never actually volunteering to be a member. But the same rules apply for leaving. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave, like Hotel California song.
So who signed you up?
My grandparent, Helen Holovchik. Helena Miloweska or Helena Holozak, Holovchik, whatever you want to say. Yeah.
So it was her initiation, do you think?
Yes.
And what about her partner, Peter? What was his
My
involvement?
step-grandfather. He was involved heavily. He did the dirty work.
What was his role in your life?
He was to abuse me. For people involved in ritual abuse and mind control, you must also sexually abuse them, so that if they do remember anything, they'll remember the sexual abuse and the pedophilia, and they'll go, everyone will say, well, that's what was wrong. And they don't go any further, any deeper than that.
So the pedophilia is
It's
almost
a cover.
safe
It's a cover. It's a red herring.
for the mind
For
control.
the real bad stuff. Not just mind control, the ritual abuse, the Satanism, satanic ritual abuse.
She had this white hair, not blonde, but white hair, standing there amongst all the other girls, and she stood out. I mean, all of the girls in the photo I think were quite attractive, but Fiona stood out because of this white hair, and she looked angelic. Yeah, back in those days, beautiful looking girl.
This is a house of horrors. I was abused in this house from when I first stayed over here. I was left here alone with what I thought were my grandparents from the age of, almost 2, I think.
I'm not sure when I found out, probably a decade ago, perhaps a bit longer. Yeah.
Was that a surprise?
No, not a surprise.
Tell me why it wasn't a surprise.
Because I have been around quite a few people who've had abuse in their past. It seemed to happen quite a lot.
My biggest problem with Helen was when I was pregnant with Fiona, my first child, Helen determined that she was having the child and I was going back to work. And this was a foreign idea to me, you know, like I'd never heard of this.
What does she mean have?
She was going to have, I could visit Fiona on weekends.
To raise her?
She was going to have her all week and I was allowed to see her weekends. Okay. Helen, I'm having this baby because I want to have this baby, you know. No way, you know. And she was determined that she wanted this baby.
See, that's the original gate, security gate, and there used to be a dog out there all the time. That's where the dog named Satan lived. There used to be a sign at the front of the house with the name Lublin written on it. And that's named after the town in which the death camp was that Peter worked at.
At times I'd go over, when Fiona was young, if she stayed over there, I'd go to pick her up. He used to play the pillow like a guitar, you know, and get Fiona to dance. And he used to say repeatedly all the time, and now it would be something I'd respond to, but he would say, Fiona and Poppy have got a secret, hey? Fiona and Poppy have got secrets, you know, don't you tell anyone your secrets, you know. And he used to say that repeatedly.
I remember being abused in that garage. I remember there was an old fridge in that garage. When I was 3, I was put in it with all bugs and roaches and everything, and he shut the door on me, Peter did. Freaked me out. And I remember the dog. I used to have to run and hide from the dog, and he used to set the dog onto me. It was the first flashback I ever had, and it was of me being tied on my knees in front of a big table, and Peter and the next door neighbour, who was a really tall, well-built guy with brown curly hair, they murdered a little blonde toddler. Not toddler, it was about 3.
Peter had supposedly suicided. Fiona started having a lot of memories, a lot of flashbacks, a lot of memories coming up about what had happened.
Oh, well, I've been around when she's had ab reactions outside of therapy.
Right.
So I've been around when she's been upset.
Yep.
So there'd be times when she'd have memories come back, something's happened that's upset her and she's not known why, and then later on get upset or something else has happened that's triggered her to be upset or angry. And
I've lived it, and you can't even possibly try to tell me that what I lived through was something from what it wasn't. You can't do that. You have no right to deny someone's personal testimony.
So many atrocities occurred in this house. Just too many to name. Multiple crimes for all of my childhood.
Doesn't matter. Yes. They're good.
Shane, that's your bit, mate. Oh, you got the special bit. Shane, that's yours. That's SpongeBob SquarePants. Testicles. Bad mother. Really bad mother.
Happy birthday, sweetheart.
Mm-hmm. I can still almost hear it.
She's a good person, and the good thing, that one of the things I really admire about Fiona is that she is growing, and she's growing all the time, and I find that amazing. I don't think I'd be her friend if she was just in the doldrums and didn't want to get out of it. She has had a lot on her plate in her past, and she's working towards bettering herself every day, which is fantastic. We all should be doing that.
This is all spray painted fresh paint. This is your walkway. And this is fresh. This is since we were here a year ago. Cash, come and check that there's markings as we'd expect here. I think there is. There seems to be a path
wasn't difficult to believe. It was just new.
So you believe? Do you believe Fiona's descriptions of her past?
Yeah.
Lost the paint markings, haven't we? Oh, what do you reckon? Do we just follow the path? Yeah. This way? This place, there's graves everywhere here. It just goes for ages.
She isn't doing any, she's not motivated for her own gain at all. She is always motivated for the greater good, for social justice, for helping people that might need help.
She ends up in the mess of someone else's life so often. You know, the things that really matter about someone else's life. She's only just met the person and she's suddenly bought in and she's involved and she's helping them and she's advising them and what have you.
Without Fiona, none of this would have come to fruition. Fiona, I could never thank her enough for what she's done for me and for my son. For my son especially, you know, I'm an adult and you can pick and choose your friends when you're older, but when you're a child you trust everybody, and that's hard as a parent, to put somebody in front of them with such a big thing that's happened to them and expect them to trust again.
Well, with the Gary Willis, it was, you know, she couldn't sleep. You know, she knew it was going to be trouble going into that, but she couldn't sleep, and you know, she felt she was being asked to do something about it.
This particular teacher and a second teacher used to get these 13-year-old boys who were quite big. She had Down syndrome, this girl, and used to get the girls on the floor and get the boys to stick sticks up their vaginas while they masturbated.
And that's partly why I admire my mother so much, is because she chose not to deny it. She's intense, she's honest, selfless.
I just noticed living with intensity.
That's what it is. It's living with intensity in the flesh. In a way, her therapy and, you know, the healing she gained from that, it definitely eased a burden that never should have been there in the first place. Now there's a difference between the intensity her personality caused, and that's just her personality, you know, that's never going to change.
I was 8 when I was brought here. We were brought here in the daytime. I don't like being here at all. I'm very stressed at the moment. Brought here by my Lithuanian grandmother, Helen or Helena Miloweska or Holovchek. And we waited for nightfall. We got off at Waterfall train station, I believe. We were met here. Dr. Mark, Leonis Petruscus, was here, the red-headed mistress or partner or whatever of the Engadine policeman. My uncle David Holozak, my father's younger half-brother. And there were at least 2 other people here. There could have been 6 to 8 people looking down on me.
I was right out of my depths. Right out of my depths. Absolutely.
This is probably the worst memory from my childhood. I looked in the grave and there was a partially decomposed, there was a body of a partially decomposed, light-haired person. It was at least shoulder length, blondish, pale coloured hair. It was half decomposed, there was maggots. So it was fresh. It's a body that my perpetrators had put in here and, you know, here's one prepared earlier. It was all ready to go. So like I said, there was at least 6 people. They had straps, picked my body up on the straps and lowered me down into a very deep hole. They laid me face up on top of the partially decomposed body. They were chanting. They were dressed in robes. I was naked. I have a very clear memory of being lowered down and them. It wasn't quite. I can see light, a silhouette, the silhouettes of them. So it must have been not too dark, or it's a full moon, something like that. And they're chanting to their pagan gods. And this is a rebirth ceremony. The thing, the decomposed body inside, is called a ghoul. I was told that it would come to life once the lid was closed, or once I was in there. I believed this thing was going to come to life. They put the lid on top and it went completely dark. And I thought this thing was then grabbing me and suffocating me. I was screaming my head off. I was screaming as much as an 8-year-old could scream, as loud as I could scream. I was screaming for God. I was screaming, Jesus, help me. I was terrified beyond words. And I exhausted all the oxygen in there. They left me in there too long. They didn't mean to do that. And I died. And I woke up in the emergency room of Sutherland Hospital. The room was tiled from floor to ceiling in pale bluish tiles. I was on a metal slab. There was an old oxygen tank, a big oxygen tank in the room. There was a big light shining in my eyes. There were nurses in shower caps. And one nurse, and I had a mask on my face, and one nurse said to me, "We nearly lost you." She was very warm, and then she said, "Mummy's here," and oh, my heart leapt. I thought my mum was there. I could see the door to my right. Wasn't Mummy, it was the red-headed witch that had helped lower me in the grave, the lover of Leonis Petriscus, and I don't know what she was, whether she was the wife or whatever of the fat Engadine policeman. She was a slim-built woman with very red hair, long red hair, and she had a black crucifix on a gold chain. And I remember looking at her and just thinking, that's not Mummy. But I couldn't say anything. And then Dr. Petriscus, or Dr. Mark, as I was made to call him throughout my younger years, released me into his care. And I was taken back to Engadine. I was taken back to Helen Holozak's house at 14 McAllister Avenue, and I was in there, and I remember being sitting in a chair, and I remember Leonis Petriscus just freaking out and pacing the room and talking in Polish or whatever, another language, to my grandmother, and they were all panicking and freaking out. And then I remember him subjecting me to unethical hypnosis and trying to make me forget the whole thing. And I remember I had a near-death experience during this. I went through a tunnel, and there was light at the end of the tunnel. I painted that tunnel on my bedroom wall at 40 Aringo Street, Budgewoi, when my mum and brother and I did a mural on my bedroom wall. And I painted the tunnel, and I told my mum, that's the time tunnel, that's the Doctor Who time tunnel. And I knew it was the tunnel that I'd gone through when I died. You know, for those who say I'm making this up, live it and then tell me I made it up. I want to go now.
The ultimate thing was my children, nourishing them, helping them develop and all that. And that's why it seems like such like a contradiction in that, you know, people, how did you let that happen? If I didn't have that strength and the Lord, I couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. It's too bloody hard, you know, to get up and keep going. It's like Fiona's still going. You know, the girls, you know what they've had to deal with. And it's not finished yet, you know, but what they've had to deal with, you know, you've got to get up and keep going. You've got to get up and keep going, you know.
How can a human being go through what I went through and survive it and get, you know, Steve kept saying, oh, I can't believe that you can do this. I can't believe you can do this. And I'm like, well, neither can I.
I would walk on my, first when I was young, Peter would walk me, I'd walk on my own to, later on to Dr. Mark's house, but there was another house as well. And I would walk, I have vivid memories of being walked up this road by Peter and getting to the end of this road and turning left, and down the end of that road is Engadine Boys Town. It's just you just turn left up there and Engadine Boys Town. You turn right up there and go around the corner and you got Dr. Mark's or Leonis Petriscus' medical centre. This is where Leonis Petriscus worked, Dr. Mark, Melov. Every person employed at this medical practice in the 70s and 80s were involved in the ritual abuse of myself and other children, and crimes and murders and covering up murders and writing false medical reports to cover for the crimes that they committed. For the Sutherland Shire, and especially around Engadine Waterfall area.
A number one rule within that environment, that world, is never, number one rule is never, well, number one rule is there is no fight club. There is no fight club. There is no fight club. You know, we don't exist. That's number one rule. Second rule is never put your own personal interests, desires, passions, fetishes, you know, whatever, before the common good. Never. And Bailey violated the good of the coven, well, the good of the order. It's not the coven. Covens are little groups. The good of the order.
I used to walk here myself, where I had the privilege of being sexually abused by Leonis Petriscus, otherwise known as Dr. Mark. I don't remember this house. This wasn't here. But this is the general location that I was made to walk down. I've handed in police statements about what happened in this area. I was sexually abused by Leonis Petriscus and the red-headed woman who was associated with the Engadine policeman. And I've made detailed statements about being abused here when I was about 14, 15. The sexual abuse at the hands of Peter Holozak stopped at about age 12. Well, it did stop at age 12. I remember the day I had the argument with him. And that was after Dr. Mark, as I knew him, said, no more, he's not to touch you anymore. And then Dr. Mark was only allowed to touch me. Pretty exclusive.
I thought he was so young. I thought he was about 32, 34. I can still remember, and he was a very slight man. And but what really stuck in my head was that she called him Dr. Mark, because in those years you didn't ever speak to a doctor by their Christian name.
Not only as her friend do I believe her, but and I am a person that needs strong evidence for things, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. Yeah, there's a lot of and it needs to be looked at.
And people don't realise that these things happen. And since this, I have grown immensely as a person because I was so naive. I didn't think that there were people like this. I didn't think people did this kind of stuff. I didn't know that that people hurt children just because they think it's fun. I really, honestly, I was so naive. I didn't think there were people like this in the world until this happened.
So I'd usually be walked to this church where they perform satanic rituals. I saw multiple sacrifices committed here. This is a stone altar. Very easy to clean. Chloe, who was 4, she was murdered here. Little 4-year-old girl, beautiful with those green come-to-bed eyes and very dark classic bob haircut. She was the daughter of the red-headed woman who was at Garrawara Cemetery. She was the partner of the fat Engadine policeman. I remember him sitting in here and everything. He used to walk. He was really overweight and he used to walk like that with his hands turned to the back. So I saw Chloe killed right here, and then after her death, her mother, the red-headed mother, went insane and she was bumped off as well because she became a liability. Father Evans, he was convicted for pedophilia and he was connected to this place. So it was nothing for me to walk, you know, to Engadine Boys Town, Australia's first boys town. The original Engadine Boys Town. My father was abused here.
A reject from the coven.
Was he really?
No, Frank wasn't like that at all. No, he wanted that stable family situation because he'd never had it. He only knew abuse in his home. He was so badly treated that he used to roam the streets all night until his mother came home from on the last train from work and meet her up at the station. So he had no home life to speak of.
He was quite normal until I think he started working with acid and cleaning houses with acid, and I think that has a toll on your liver. And then he started drinking, and that has a toll on your liver, and he just became violent. And he hung around the Malat family, as we said, which I didn't know about till my mother's interview.
She said that wasn't Dad, that was, what'd you say, the devil inside, yeah. And that's what it was like. It was like something had taken him over.
We can't even see anything, do we? Okay, let's go a little way down, okay? Let's go a little way. We just want a clearing where we can see the ledges. Now, this is so overgrown. Okay, so we've like trekked through the bush, trying to find a particular murder scene at the Weir. And this, in the 70s, when I was a child, was an extremely popular swimming hole. And there was a big dam wall, and we called this the Weir. We used to be able to just walk down a dirt track all the way down there. And on that side of the Weir, one night, it was a moonlit night, it's where they murdered the 12-year-old that I saw abducted from, it's either Heathcote Road here or something that looked a lot like it. And they, I was in the back of a car, and they abducted a 12-year-old girl who was walking by the road. She was wearing red and white, you know, t-shirt and shorts. She had long brown hair. I just remember she had long brown hair, and pretty girl. And when we stopped over to talk to her, she knew them. And they I was in the back right-hand passenger side of the car, and she jumped in the back left. And they handed her some candy. I think it was laced. And this
poor girl. There was about, I can't remember, there's a group of men circled around her in robes, but a lot of them were priests from Engadine Boys Town, and various people, and what they did was they hanged this girl to death on the ledge, and then they sodomised her, and as they sodomised her dead body, the remaining men stood around masturbating, and I saw all of this. And then they made me think they were throwing her body in the Weir, and then I can remember being frightened of swimming. My father used to make me swim across the Weir, and there used to be like a little, I don't know, some sort of motor pump house or something on this side, and I just have this image of going, oh, I just don't want to touch any dead bodies, like while I'm swimming, because I didn't like murky waters. And to this day, I don't like swimming in waters where I can't see what's underneath because of this experience. And I remember swimming across, because this happened when I was 6, and I remember swimming after that, not long after that, and thinking, oh, please don't let me touch any dead bodies with my toes. I just don't want to touch any dead bodies. And I remember being terrified when we used to come as a family and swim here. We swim here all the time. So they sodomised her. And then the next thing I remember, seeing her body was transported to Holsworthy Army Barracks, and we went through a side gate off Heathcote Road, and we were met by Chan. He seemed a lot more powerful than just someone who was in the reserves. My experience of him was, and that girl was, well, I'll talk about that when we get to Holsworthy. I just remembered as we're climbing up the hill, I forgot to tell you about Stephen, who he raped me also on that ledge. So while those men were busy with and Peter Holozak was there, he was one of the ones raping her, but while they were doing all that, this guy who fancied me pulled me aside, a pedo, and raped me violently. And I had to relive all that in the police statement, and I really had to detail it for the first time in my life. And that was an unsanctioned rape. I wasn't to just be touched by anybody. And he paid for it with his life later on, when I was about 14. He was burnt at the stake. No, he was bashed to death at the dog breeder's house. He was tied to a stake, bashed to death. And so all in all, rather nasty experience.
She has a voice. She is articulate. You wouldn't know it to speak to her, but in her writing and, she gives other people a voice, and she does it well.
I'm not stopping for some stupid reason. I mean, I can't stop. I'm compelled to keep going. This is not just about me. This is about a whole bunch of victims that are not here to give voice themselves to what they experience. This is not just me. I represent a whole thousands of people behind me, babies and adults and children and whatever, right? And I'm very conscious of that.
And to see the pain and anguish she's in, it's not something you put on. So those reactions are real.
This is Holsworthy Army Barracks. It's one of the side entrances on Heathcote Road. This is the sort of entrance that I was taken into the army grounds via. It's through this side entrance that I was picked up by, I was collected by like those jeeps you see in MASH, on the TV show MASH. Those army sort of jeeps with the big backs on them, with the canvas flaps. I was met by an Asian, recruit named Chan, and apparently he's the only Asian at the time that was at Holsworthy, and he was supposed to be in the reserves. He was a vicious serial killer. The girl that was murdered at the Weir was brought here, and Chan collected her body. She, in the end, ended up in the military freezer, and I was abused by Chan and other officers in sort of makeshift camps on the army grounds. It was distressing, to say the least. And we better get out of here because someone's just pulled up. Let's go, Shane.
Children haven't seen daylight. They're trapped. They held her down
fifth level under Holsworthy.
And you said that they said to you they're waiting for the light man.
Yeah, they told me that they used to get visited by the light man.
What does that mean?
They described him, and I turned around and I said, oh yeah, I know him. You know, that's Jesus Christ. They didn't know him or his name. They just, No, those kids are the worst memory of all. I've seen some bad shit by those kids in the cage, and I was made to bond with them, and spent a few days in a cage with them in the dark, and they'd be sitting there like a captivated kindergarten audience, you know, and I'd be teaching them about, you know, what's up there, and I was only little. What was I, 6?
Like with I was telling you at East Wollumbar, where they were sticking sticks up handicapped girls' vaginas while the teachers masturbated, and they've done nothing about it. You tell me where the reality lies in all that.
Hurry up. I'm scared. Those military police might be going through our car. You got it. Come on, Ray Martin. Welcome to my parish. This is the head church in the Sutherland Shire Diocese for satanic ritual. This is a marble altar, a step up from St John Bosco. Marble floor, very easy clean-up of blood spillage. I attended multiple rituals here, satanic ritual abuse. I've seen multiple people murdered on this marble slab. So we're at Regina Coli Catholic Church in Beverly Hills in the Sutherland Shire, a suburb south of Sydney. You'll note the eagle, which is a predominant symbol. Features, it's also representative of the phoenix, the whole order out of chaos theme, etc., dating back to Horus and from ancient Egypt. I well remember that window. I think there's a crypt beneath this one, but I don't know how you get there. So this was the one that was attended by Dr. Mark, aka Leonis Petruscus, and various people around the Sutherland Shire, various police officers, lots of priests, the priests who worked here at the time. This church was actually founded by a relative of Father Paul Evans, who was convicted of pedophilia at Boys Town. There's strong ties between this church and the American military, which is indicated by various emblems on the front of the church, on the windows. So this is where we came for the real big sort of, what do you call it, sort of, I don't know, regional ceremonies. I was made Queen Bee of this diocese when I was about 14. Not something to aspire to. I mean, yeah. How freaking obvious can it get? Look at the eagle. What's that got to do with the Bible and the biblical Jesus Christ and biblical Christianity? What has this got to do with Christianity? Nothing. It's got everything to do with Satanism. That's all I'm saying.
She was just different. They didn't know how to handle her. There was no one like her in our year at school.
Have you met anyone like her since?
No. I have to say no.
That's really normal for gifted kids to have that. It's, you know, it's not all fabulous, and that's something it's hard to convey to people. So, you know, you have that isolation, that natural isolation starts at around primary school, where you're where suddenly your interaction with other people has, you know, this meaning in this secluded environment, and there's all of a sudden there's this sort of social construct that you're finding your place in that.
She was so sharp, really, really sharp. Very intelligent girl.
Now, the effect that has for a lot of people when they meet her is that, actually there's probably two aspects. One is this mirror effect. When people get to know her, they can't play their games with her. And that's, so for people who like to play games, for people who've got things to, I don't like to say things to hide, but they're trying to present themselves as one way when they're not really that way, they will find themselves very uncomfortable with Fiona. And Fiona will pick that up, and she doesn't like it. And she won't say, I don't like you to the person, but she doesn't like people who do play games, and people who are pretending to be something they're not. And her reaction to that is, it's not anger or whatever, but she'll provoke them. She'll say something, she'll put them in talk to them about something, put them in a situation where they have to look at that. You know, what game you're playing. If you're going to play this game, then you're going to get, they end up feeling very awkward.
This is Kurnell. We're at the Caltex oil refinery. I was brought here when I was 9 with a group of about 10 children. We were placed in front of one of the factory furnace ovens, and one by one they threw the children in the ovens. They made me think that I was going to be next, and I tried to stop them from burning a good friend of mine that I'd grown up with. These are kids that were just bred in secret for use for this purpose and for sex slavery. Yeah, I was roughed up for trying to stop them, and I was made to think I was next, but I wasn't. It was just to traumatise me. The encircled pentagram sign on the Caltex symbol is no accident. There's only one way you become that rich and powerful. That's by compromising.
To gain that power, they will sacrifice people. They'll all seek a supernatural power in some way, whatever way they can get that power. But that's the very basic bottom line. It doesn't matter what you want to call it.
I mean, I could take a victim so far, but how are you going to deal with the spiritual side of all of this? You know.
So you see it as an essential ingredient, the spiritual side.
It's the main ingredient. If you're baking a cake, it's the flour.
That's something you encounter daily, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of. And you know, they don't fully consciously acknowledge that it's there, but once you start seeing it, it doesn't stop.
I understand coven. I mean, the old traditional one that everyone understood was a witch's coven, which is a lot more prevalent than what people would like to believe, I think, exists. But then you have, I think, as I understand it now, I might be wrong, but I think it's, I consider an occult group to be a coven. Occult as it can come under many, many names, but there's always like a mystery religion aspect to it. Now, I think I have come to face with many types, whether you want to call them Scottish Rite ones, bikey ones, Hare Krishna ones. You know, there's so many. And I just see a coven as a group of people, any description, and they have a hidden aspect to them.
All right, well, we're at Kurnell. It's a peninsula. There's heaps of little beaches and coves and things around here. We're losing light, so we can't find the beach, but I remember distinctly a beach that was I was taken to as a kid by Dr. Mark aka Leonis Petruscus. And when I was taken there, I was told to dig up a body, and I dug up a body of a little boy who must have been about 5 and had blonde hair. It was in this area. There's a very prominent pedophile politician was there, and he wanted Leonis to cover for the death. This is a politician who's into necrophilia, and he's often been portrayed as the Undertaker by newspaper cartoonists, because I think people know what he's into. I think it's one of the major magazines said that he used to like to go over to Thailand to have sex with little boys. Well, this fellow likes to have sex with dead little boys, and I know because I saw it, to traumatise me, because that's the whole point of trauma-based mind control, is to re-traumatise the victim, to keep their trauma-based programming intact. So I experienced lots of traumas, and this was one of them. And I overheard a discussion between this politician and Dr. Mark Petruscus about how they're going to fabricate the death of the child, which was probably, I don't know how he died, you know, asphyxiation or something. But there was talk of a blue ringed octopus sting, and so I don't know what was worked out, or whether that was what they used as to cover, or I'm not sure. But I know that the researchers behind this doco since found out that Petruscus wrote published an article to do with a death in Papua New Guinea of a 5-year-old, well, the stinging of a 5-year-old girl who got poisoned by a conefish. So it was certainly an area that Petruscus was familiar with, and having studied tropical medicine at Sydney Uni, he was familiar with poisons and all that sort of thing. That's one thing I experienced down here. Another thing I experienced down here when I was a young child was a nurse that worked with Leonis. In the daytime, she was used as a honey trap for a surfer. She seduced him and promised him sex. And then I think he was drugged, and the guy had like curly blondish hair, and I saw him ritually sacrificed to Moloch. It was a fire ceremony that night, and that's what they like to do. They like to burn people alive. And they did it somewhere around here. I mean, it's so... it was very secluded back then. Sydney wasn't so populated, you know, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. So this was a popular site for the coven members to murder people and dispose of bodies without being detected. And they just get the local cops who are involved with them, or local doctors like Petruscus to cover anyway. And I wrote to the New South Wales Coroner, and I said, look, my researchers have just found out the true identity of Dr. Mark. He's actually Petruscus, and I said every birth certificate and death certificate that man ever signed now needs to be investigated, because everything that man did should be treated as suspicious. And they responded, oh, we can't do anything without being directed by the New South Wales Police. So I forwarded their response, their written response, to the New South Wales Police Commission. I said, could you please direct the coroner to investigate these, you know, these documents that Petruscus has fabricated, to my knowledge. And I made a big list of all the murders that I remember that he wrote death certificates for or was involved with in some way. That's the reality, folks. I've had to fight very hard to have the crimes I witnessed and was subjected to investigated. Well, they happened. And they happened here. Australia, where the bloody hell are you? Buried.
I have often described her as crazy. This week, you know, talking to different friends, I've said I've got my crazy friend coming down to stay with me this weekend. But she's crazy in a good way, fun crazy.
So I dared to ask Neville Davis, do you think he may be Asperger's
Yeah, so he
or
hogties him as a
autistic?
means of
So he hogties him to
diagnosing.
prove to me that he's not, because he should be screaming his lungs out by now if he's autistic. Because a normal autistic kid would be screaming their lungs out by now, and he thinks that this is a big joke and a big game.
So we're in there in the dark, and it was very intimate, and it gave me an opportunity to talk about everything with him. It was a lovely experience, actually, and it's just one of the most privileged experiences of my life. I mean, all this deep and meaningful stuff, and this is a child who I only knew as my friend's son, you know, like really.
And the place was just crowded, it was packed, full of cops and dignitaries and councilmen and the mayor and priests from St Stanislaw College and just the local churches. So I'm up there and Mark says, you're up. So I come down here and everybody's watching me. These curtains were pulled back, and at the back of the stage was a huge banner, the ritual banner, and it was huge, big silk satin banner. There was an altar, a big altar erected in the middle here, and I was made to lie down on the altar, and Bruce Spence raped me on the altar. That was that part of the ritual. So I'm, what am I, 15, turning 16 at this time? And this was all happening during the time of the Bathurst City races, so the massive crowds here are disguised by the thousands and thousands of people and dignitaries and politicians that pour into Bathurst during the races. On stage are Bruce Spence, who's a crap actor. He's been in Dimboola and Mad Max. There's Richie Benaud, our Australian sporting legend who was captain of the Australian cricket team. He's dead now. There's John Avery, Police Commissioner, New South Wales Police Commissioner at the time, John Avery. There's Kim Beazley Senior. And then there's an obese red-headed woman who had long red hair. You know, there was a microphone here like this sort of thing, and Beazley's the main one, but it alternated between Benaud and Beazley. But they had a real wry sort of manner about them, and they spoke they had a similar demeanour, and just mocking humanity. And so Beazley was up commentating, presiding over things. When they dragged onto stage, they dragged a heavily pregnant woman onto stage here, and she was screaming her head off. And I remember sitting over there thinking, oh my God, she's not drugged, she's not hypnotised. And it was horrendous. So there's adrenaline going through her system and adrenaline going through her body, and she's heavily, heavily pregnant and naked, and she had a brown bowler haircut. And she's one of what they call a breeder, and she's used just for breeding for these rituals and for child sex trafficking. And they drag her onto the stage and they lay her down, and the head for a sacrifice is always here, so they're laying the feet's that end. Where she's screaming, right, Beazley's over here, and he goes to us, I'll never forget this, he goes, she's screaming and making a fuss, and he goes, excuse us for a minute. And everyone laughs. Everyone thinks that's hilarious, except for me. And then because they had two big security guards dragging her onto stage, and they needed extra help, so Bruce Spence, who is like usually the thug type who likes to hurt people, Bruce Spence and John Avery, the cop, he used what he knows about holding people down, and the four of them pin her down. And they're holding her legs and her arms and whatever, shoulders. And then Benno has a ceremonial dagger, and he's like, it's further back. It's a shame this is here because he's further back, and he does his usual crap. You know, they worship their gods, you know, Baal, Lucifer, hail Satan,
son of the morning, and all the other gods and goddesses, you know. And then he has this knife, and he slams it after he's done all his ritualistic sort of chanting and words and whatever, and people are chanting or whatever, and he slams this dagger, ceremonial dagger, 2 hands, into the woman's, I don't know, around about here where the bone ends, and he can get in, and he tears her open with the knife right down to the pelvic bone, and blood just pisses out everywhere. It's like a waterfall and just everything. And then they pull the baby out, and then there are people assisting, and they've got a gold platter, and they've got a chalice, and they collect the blood of the baby. They drain the baby's blood in the chalice, and then they chop the baby up and put it on the gold platter, and then they pass it around for Holy Communion. So it's the black mass, the real typical old-fashioned black mass that the Catholic mass is based on, right? The Catholic mass the Latin mass is a sanitised version of this. There's nothing Christian about Catholic mass. So that's all going on, and then the next thing I remember is they lined up, this stage was lined with children who must have been about maybe 8, 9, 10 years of age, that sort of thing. And they had them lined up like this on the stage. They went like this, and they lined the children up. And the children were hypnotised. And the children came forward, and they were like this. They were just like this. They just, you know, as they were told, they did nothing, and they just stared straight ahead. And they're very attractive children. Bruce Spence had a samurai sword. It was incredibly sharp. He goes along each child, and he has a certain stance about him. Is it that way? Or is it that way? And he slices off the heads of each child. I don't know if he turns, or I can't remember what he does, but then he, you know, goes along and, you know, like this, and he goes along and chops off each head. And each kid falls, the body just falls, and blood is going everywhere. I mean, if you DNA tested this area, there would have to be remains of someone's blood and DNA in here. There would have to be somewhere. Then they break out into a bloodied orgy. Now these people, the whole point behind doing the, having the woman not drugged and not hypnotised is to pump as much adrenaline through her blood as possible, because these people are addicted to adrenaline, and when they drink the blood, you know, it's, you know, the baby's blood, you know, the baby's in distress, so it passes on somehow to the kid, and that's why they, you know, have this sort of situation going on. And at the end, I was over here, and a bloody orgy broke out, and everyone started having sex. They're sexually aroused by this stuff. You've got to understand that they are sexually aroused by this crap. I don't know, everyone's just having sex with people, and Kim Beasley Senior was down here, and I was there, and he came down, and he picked up a head of one of the kids that had dark hair, and I'm standing here, and Beasley picks up this head, and he shoves it in my face, like this. And there's this decapitated head in my face. And he says, "Take ye, eat." And he made me take a bite out of the face. And then everyone just had an orgy. It was just disgusting. And the most vile thing you've ever seen in your life. and that's Bathurst City Hall.
3 times I've had to flee, leave everything behind 3 times. One, okay, but 3 times.
What I do have to offer is I can share how I got out.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
Deep down, she wants to enjoy life, I think, but she finds it very hard.
In no way did it change Mum's personality, but how do I put it? Grandma phrased it very well. So she could place blame where blame was due.
It's so complex. If I want to put it in, apply it, to behaviour. It's so complex because I always thought that I was rational and analytical, and that you could sort of make sense of things. Well, sometimes you can't. It's outside those boundaries.
The Great Hall at Sydney University is where I witnessed the most heinous human sacrifice of all time, and the most difficult one to process and talk about in therapy, and that is the flaying of a boy who was about 5, little blonde boy. Anthony Kidman and 4 other men were dressed in multicoloured robes according to the pentagram sort of symbol that I suppose captured the inner Sydney diocese that Kidman led, his coven, and so there were multicoloured robes that I've drawn. I was quite young. I tried to stop the ritual as soon as I realised what was going on and what they were about to do to this child. They crucified him and flayed his skin and pinned it back, and then they strung him up over. Once they'd done it, they did it to him alive. Once they'd finished that, they strung him up over the stage of the Great Hall. Nicole Kidman was sitting down to the front to look at, to the left as you look at the stage. I was sitting more to the back right, and I ran up and tried to stop them, and Bruce Spence put his big boot put his foot on my neck to stop me, and he just laughed at me, and everyone laughed at me, screaming and carrying on, trying to stop what they were doing. And quite a number of university staff are involved in Sydney Uni chapter, I suppose, of the Order, which was run by Kidman, and Leonis Petrescus was a member of this particular coven at one stage, and he was at Sydney University around the same time as Anthony Kidman. So there's lots of prominent coven members who have gone through Sydney University. It's a very dark place, and I would not allow my children to attend here, even on scholarship. I also remember being taken into the room on an upper floor of chemistry lecturers' room, and they did something to me there, and it was overlooking the city, and I was also taken into a sort of a medical basement area where I was subjected to some unethical practices, and Hope Michelson was involved with that. She's someone I went to uni with later on at Bond University. When I was young, I remember her clearly, dressed in a white robe and assisting a dentist who used to be, I think he formerly worked at Auschwitz.
And it allowed me to sit there and be an observer to my own deprogramming process, which is phenomenal. Like that false military, he's a really military programmer and reprogrammer in Adelaide.
Thompson.
Yeah, that evil mongrel David Thompson. He couldn't believe it. He said, "Are you co-conscious? Are you co-conscious for all this when you're talking?" Because I went through the process and I described everything as requested. I just answered the questions. And he said, "You co-conscious?" I said, "Well, yeah."
I've always been co-conscious. There's been no Sybil, an amnesia for what we just talked about. And that was my saving.
I could ignore it and, live for the moment, as you say, but I know I couldn't sleep at night.
So this is a very memorable church. I remember this. I came here with Veronica. The place was packed, and I witnessed a heck of a ceremony, and Veronica was the Grand Dame, and she was my mentor, and I really liked her a lot. Red-headed lady. She had something to do with, some sort of girls' school or something like that. And I saw her ritually sacrificed here in front of all the dignitaries. The head being up this end, on that image, is no accident. That's the way you face on an altar when you ritually sacrifice someone. The head's always up this end. And it's called the left-handed path, so they always use the left hand, and they start with the upper chest area and down. When she was dying, I actually was so distraught I collapsed up behind this side of the altar, and everybody thought, oh, that was great, because it's a sign of affection and that we had a proper bond. I succeeded her as Grand Dame, and yeah, this is distressing. And of course, when I left, it left them with no one that they'd trained up in time to succeed the Grand Dame position. Veronica actually died quite young, and it was her choice. She'd had a gutful and she wanted out, and she didn't know how else to get out. Think of the song, you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. She chose to check out. It's the only way out for her. And she was a really nice person. I think she was connected to St. Sophia College, but I can't remember well enough. I know she had some role to do with girls' school or a girls' dorm. At the end, I had to compose myself. Despite the fact she was laying there dead, with blood everywhere, I had to compose myself. I had no choice. And they stuck some robe on me and something on my head. I don't know. But anyway, this is really, really, really upsetting. Well, this is just another ritual site. That's all. So this is Anglican, and you've got another eagle. It's just another heavy occult symbol. I was about 11, around the time that Queen Elizabeth came to declare Bankstown a city. I just remember children connected with like a silver cord or got silver cord and around their necks, and a row of children. That's all I remember. I don't remember anything else. The rose is very important to Church of England covens. Serpent entwined around a pole. I mean, once again, what the hell's an eagle got to do with the Bible? Nothing. This is 16 William Edward Street, Longville, in sort of North Sydney. This is Anthony Kidman's old house. I was brought here when I was 14. I was dropped off by Leonis Petriscus. It was my birthday, and there was, well, I think it was around my birthday, I think it was, and there was a post-production party for John Bell's play, and this house was, the back room overlooking pool was full of actors and producers, directors, whatever, and theatre people. John Bell, Bruce Spence was here. I'm pretty sure Bruce Spence answered the door. I remembered the house was 2-storey at the back and kind of 1-storey at the front. I remembered it was Federation style, and I remembered the back room, and I remember the pool. I saw people taking what I think was cocaine in the back room near the pool in the lounge area. People were kind of in costume. There was all different, I don't know if it was a fancy dress party, I really can't remember exactly what everyone was wearing, but I know there was a lot of famous actors there. After everybody had gone home, I was left alone with John Bell and Anthony Kidman, and I remember being in the back lounge room that opens up onto the pool area, and I was assaulted in the lounge room area by Kidman and Bell, and I watched them engage in homosexual sex there. Then I was taken out into the pool, and I was thrown in the pool naked, and Kidman got in the pool as well, and he held my... We were at the far end of the pool, in line with the back gate, and I was facing out of the pool. I was facing John Bell, who was acting like an idiot, like doing a monkey dance, and he had a mask on his face, and he was naked. And I was being held very painfully. Anthony Kidman was in the pool, locking my elbows together and pulling my shoulders back, so it was like a type of jiu-jitsu type hold, something, it would be something you learn in martial arts, and it was very painful. And while he did this, John Bell would be dancing like a monkey, and every now and then, and he'd be chanting some sort of song, and then every now and then he just stomped on my head as he said certain words in the like a poem, like a rhyme, and he'd stomp on my head and hold me under, like force me under, and I nearly drowned. And then I'd come up again, I'd be coughing, spluttering and crying and vomiting water, and then it'll happen again and again. It happened over and over, and I don't remember what happened after that, except I woke up the next day tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. It was very cold and cement-like, and I remember light filtering down through a doorway, but it was like a ladder or a very steep stairway to upstairs, and I was seated in a chair, naked, tied to a chair, and Kidman was smacking me over the head really hard. He was physically assaulting me, and he was screaming at me, "Do you remember now? Do you remember now?" And meanwhile, Nicole Kidman, his daughter, had her arms crossed, and she was leaning against a wall and sneering at me in contempt, with contempt. She didn't like me at all. She never liked me. I associated with her quite a bit throughout our childhoods, and she always treated me terribly. Mrs. Kidman washed and dried my clothes, and I was dressed, and Dr. Mark came and picked me up.
I didn't know that about the clothes, Mrs. Kidman. Did you just remember that then?
No.
What I believe has been coming out in the Royal Commission against child abuse is proving that this is not isolated. Fiona's might be unique in her story, but across the board it's not isolated. In fact, it's more prevalent than not.
So, I hear you were abused as a child. You want to tell us all about that? In 7
Yeah, it was
minutes?
shit.